Just 1 hour, Marita. I'll be right back. Naomi said it like she was only running to the store. Her coat was still halfway off one shoulder, and she smelled faintly of hairspray and perfume. Cheap, sharp, rushed. She didn't make eye contact as she kissed the tops of her children's heads, Daniel, Marcus, and little Eli. Then she grabbed her keys and was out the door before I could ask anything. I stood there, holding a half-folded towel, watching the door click shut. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sniffles of 3 confused toddlers who barely knew me outside of holidays and hurried visits. I wiped my hands on the towel and knelt down. "All right," I said softly. "Let's get you settled." That night I kept looking at the front door. My phone stayed on the table, fully charged, screen lit every time I checked. No messages. I called once, then again. Voicemail. I sent a text. "Are you okay?" Nothing. Dinner was simple grilled cheese and canned tomato soup. Marcus cried because Naomi hadn't come back for bedtime. Daniel wet the sheets. Eli curled up in the dog bed, even though we hadn't had a dog since Harold died. I tucked them in anyway. I read them the only picture book I had in the house twice. And when the lights were out, I sat on the edge of the couch watching the storm roll in over the trees. I tried not to panic. People get overwhelmed, I told myself. She's young. Maybe she just needed a break. Maybe something happened. Maybe she'll knock on the door any minute now, soaked through and laughing with a flimsy excuse and a flimsy apology. But the knock never came. Instead, I spent the night on the recliner, listening to the wind rattle the windows and Eli whimper in his sleep. In the morning, there was still no call, no message, no sign. By the end of the week, I'd bought a second-hand crib, called in sick to my part-time job, and left a note on Naomi's old apartment door. 2 weeks later, I started a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote expenses. March, then underneath it, formula diapers. Doctor visit Marcus. Fever. And in the next column, name of parent present. M. Quinn. I didn't know. Then I'd be writing that same name and only that name for the next 14 years. I kept the notebook on the counter next to the phone, always within reach. At first, it was just practical formula brands, nap schedules, pediatric visits. But over time, it became something else. A quiet record of presence. For every fever I soothed, every scraped knee I bandaged, every note I signed for school, I made an entry. Not for anyone else to see. Just so I wouldn't forget that I was doing it. That someone was. When Daniel turned 5, he needed a speech therapist. I wrote that down, session dates, mileage costs. When Eli developed asthma, I logged every prescription refill and ER visit. I kept copies of insurance forms and school evaluations. I even printed emails from teachers thanking me for coming to conferences. Not one of them mentioned Naomi. The courthouse clerk didn't ask many questions when I filed for temporary guardianship. I used a lunch break and wore my best blouse. I told them Naomi had left the children in my care and hadn't been reachable. It was technically true. They gave me a stamped form and a court date I didn't think Naomi would show up for, and she didn't. A full year passed. Then one Thursday evening, the phone rang. It was her, Marita. She said, her voice hazy, uncertain, I need some help. My stomach clenched. I'd imagined this call 100 ways, but not like this. They're fine, I said, before she could ask, though she never did. Daniel just started kindergarten. Oh, she said. That's nice. Then after a pause, do you have anything extra this month just until Friday? I've had some bad luck. I didn't ask what kind. I already knew the kind of luck that drains a person dry and makes them forget they're someone's mother. I'm sorry, I said. I can't. Her silence was sharp short. Then the line went dead. That night, I found an old manila envelope in the desk drawer and labeled it Rachel Naomi Quinn, Contact and Legal. I placed the guardianship form inside. then the birth certificates, then a copy of the school emergency contacts, and then I turned the page in the ledger and kept writing. It started with Eli. He was barely 4 and couldn't quite figure out where I fit in the world. Not Mom, but not just Grandma either. One night, after a bad dream, he padded into the hallway in his 2 small pajamas, rubbing his eyes, and whispered, "Mama, Grandma." I'd never heard the phrase before, but when I scooped him up and carried him back to bed, he didn't let go. After that, the name stuck. The other boys picked it up without thinking. Teachers at school started calling me that too at first, with hesitation, then with warmth. Mama, Grandma. I'd never asked for the title, but hearing it from their mouths felt like being seen. By the time Marcus was ready for preschool, I'd already drained my savings. The small inheritance Harold left was long gone. Groceries, clinic, co-pays, shoes that didn't pinch. I stared at the tuition form for days, doing the math again and again. Then one morning, I opened Harold's old drawer and pulled out his watch. It was a gift from his father, gold scratched and still ticking. I held it for a long time before wrapping it in a handkerchief and taking it to the pawn shop down on Main. They gave me enough for the first 2 months of school. I signed the check with steady hands. Naomi came back once. It was summer. The boys were out back sticky with popsicle juice and covered in dirt. She showed up in a taxi, wearing sunglasses and a sneer. "You really think you're their mother now?" she asked, arms folded. "I think they need stability," I said. "They need someone who stays." She rolled her eyes, walked through the house like a stranger, and spent the night on the couch. The next day, she asked if I'd been saving any of the child support that had never existed. On day 3, she was gone. She didn't say goodbye. The boys barely noticed. They'd stopped expecting her. That evening, I printed a photo of the 3 of them at the park. Daniel with his missing front tooth, Marcus clutching a dandelion, Eli grinning wide, and slid it into the manila envelope with a dated note. Last visit, July 14th. Duration 3 days. No follow-up. Then I wrote the next line in the ledger. I found the note tucked behind the furnace filter the following winter, yellowed and half crumpled. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, looped, dramatic, always written like she was trying too hard to be casual. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." Just that. Nothing more. No signature. No explanation. I sat on the basement step holding it, the dust rising in tiny storms around my knees, and I felt nothing. No anger, no relief, just an old ache rising to the surface like something I'd buried too deep to rot. I didn't show the boys. By then they were already calling me Mom when they weren't thinking about it. It slipped out in doctors' offices and during school pickups, and I never corrected them. I just smiled and kept going. The years passed the way real life does, quietly, exhaustingly, beautifully. Daniel joined the debate team. Marcus got a certificate for perfect attendance 4 years in a row. Eli taught himself to play the piano on a $50 Craigslist keyboard. I added their milestones to the envelope. I logged every fever, every field trip, every parent-teacher meeting in the ledger. And Naomi never came back. Until she did. It was spring. Daniel had just gotten his learner's permit, and the mail came late that afternoon. A thick envelope return address stamped from a downtown law firm. The name on the front wasn't mine. It was Rachel Naomi Quinn versus the party, currently exercising custody. No phone call, no warning. She was filing for custody. I read the words twice then, a third time. I made coffee that night and sat up with the paperwork spread across the kitchen table, the smell of gasoline and wet earth still clinging to the boys' soccer cleats by the door. In the morning, I called a private investigator. He was expensive, blunt, and didn't ask too many questions. I wired him $1,000, the last of what I'd put away for emergencies. When he asked what I was looking for, I said, proof of what he asked. I looked over at the note now folded and sealed inside the manila envelope. Of intent, I said. She walked away on purpose. And I had 14 years of presence to prove it. The courtroom smelled like paper and nerves. Naomi walked in as if she owned the place, heels, sharp blazer, crisp hair, pinned with surgical precision. She looked like a woman who'd rehearsed for this moment, who believed she could rewrite history with a good outfit and steady voice. I sat 2 rows behind the boys, my hands curled around one soft, battered envelope. She didn't look at them. She didn't look at me. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before the hearing began, her lawyer stood instead, slick and smooth, full of concern and legalese. My client, Rachel Naomi Quinn, has been unjustly separated from her children for over a decade. She is seeking full custody and damages for emotional distress. The word damages hit me like a slap. The Judge Morrison looked at me with that kind of measured stillness people in authority practice for years. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, "do you have documentation of your guardianship?" I stood knees aching from the cold bench. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, and walked to the front of the room, the envelope balanced in both hands. "What is this?" he asked as he took it. "Proof," I said quietly, "of who raised them." He opened it and pulled out a photograph. First, Daniel, age 5, missing front teeth, holding up a spelling certificate with one hand and a juice box in the other. Then more, Marcus winning the science fair. Eli dressed as a crayon for Halloween. Signed report cards, notes from school nurses, forms authorizing field trips, emergency contact lists. Every one of them had my name, my number, my signature. The room got quiet. The kind of quiet that sinks. Naomi's lawyer shifted. Naomi blinked just once. The judge kept reading. 14 years, I said. No support, no letters, no birthdays. But they were fed. Schooled. Held when they were sick. The judge looked up slowly, eyes unreadable. And their mother's name appears on these forms, not once. He set the envelope down like it was heavier now. I sat back down. Behind me, one of the boys reached over and gently touched my shoulder. And then the judge asked, "Did their mother have any contact in that time?" "She kidnapped them," Naomi said, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "I left them for a short time, and she never gave them back. She kept them from me, my own children." The words echoed across the courtroom like something filthy. I felt the heat rise in my face but didn't speak. Not yet. Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor." My client entrusted her children to her mother-in-law during a time of crisis. Instead of support, she was cut off, isolated, denied access to her own children. We're not just requesting custody, we're pursuing legal action. I opened the envelope again and pulled out a single sheet I hadn't shown yet. I kept a record of every contact I said. Every call, every visit, if you can call them that. I handed the sheet to the clerk. She passed it to Judge Morrison. He adjusted his glasses. According to this, he said slowly, "Ms. Quinn called once, asking for financial help." Naomi said nothing. He continued flipping the paper, and once stayed for 3 days. No follow-up. "Is this accurate?" "It is," I said. "She left in the middle of the night. They woke up, and she was gone." From behind me, I heard one of the boys shift in his chair, the sound of truth settling. "Did you ever deny her access, Mrs. Quinn?" "No, Your Honor." She never asked. There was a pause, a real one. You could feel the weight of 14 years collapsing into a few quiet seconds. Judge Morrison looked at Naomi like he'd finally taken the shine off her story. The lawyer opened his mouth, but the judge raised a hand. "We're not debating intentions today," he said. "We're looking at actions. And so far, I see one parent who stayed and one who left." Naomi's mask slipped then, just for a second. Enough for me to see the anger under the polish. I turned and looked at the boys. They were watching everything quiet alert, growing into men in real time. and none of them moved to meet her eyes when she turned toward them. The report came in a plain folder. No drama, just pages stapled neatly together, printed in cold black ink. But as I read each line, I felt the truth rearrange everything I'd tried not to believe. The investigator had been thorough. Naomi hadn't just resurfaced on a whim. She'd waited, planned. It traced back to the accident. My son David. Her husband died in a construction site collapse nearly 15 years ago. I remembered the call, the way the hospital lights looked too bright, how I held her hand in the waiting room until she pulled away. What I hadn't known was that he'd taken out a life insurance policy large enough to secure his son's futures. The payout had been locked until they turned 18. Naomi was listed as beneficiary, but only if she retained legal custody. I rubbed my thumb over the corner of the report, reading the dates again. Naomi had filed a motion to declare me an unfit guardian 6 months ago. Quietly. No warning, no confrontation. Just a petition buried under paperwork. And now, 3 months before the boys turned 18, she was back. Not to rebuild, not to reconnect, but to reclaim what she saw as hers. I looked across the room where the boys' backpacks leaned against the wall. Daniel's had a university logo on it. Marcus had pinned a button that read, "Future Doctor." Eli had scrawled song lyrics across his straps in permanent marker. They didn't know yet. Not all of it. Naomi's timing wasn't maternal. It was financial. And suddenly, the pieces clicked into place, the sudden appearance, the custody suit, the performance in court. She didn't want them. She wanted what came with them. I closed the folder and placed it gently into the manila envelope. Then I added a post-it to the front in my neat, practiced handwriting. Insurance. David Quinn. Guardian clause. It was no longer about proving I had raised them. It was about protecting them from being bought and sold in their final months as minors. They weren't leverage. They were boys. Mine. And now they had to be told the truth. The judge asked them directly. One by one, they stood Daniel first, then Marcus, then Eli. Their voices were steady, but I knew the effort it took. "We don't really know her," Daniel said, "but we'd like the chance to try." He didn't look at me when he said it. None of them did. And I understood. It wasn't rejection. It was curiosity. Maybe even guilt, the kind only children feel when faced with the possibility of hurting someone who never hurt them. Judge Morrison granted Naomi a 2-week trial period. No overnights, but visits. Time to reconnect, to attempt something that resembled motherhood under court supervision. I nodded when the order was read. I kept my expression neutral, even as something in me cracked, not violently, but quietly, like wood settling in an old house. That night I made hot chocolate like I always did, set out the mugs. Daniel noticed my hands shaking when I passed the sugar. "You okay, Mama Grandma? I will be," I said. They sat with me on the couch, legs too long now for the cushions that once cradled them like nests. Marcus reached for the remote but didn't turn the TV on. Eli curled his legs beneath him. Daniel just watched me. "You're not upset?" he asked finally. "I'm proud of you," I said. "You spoke your truth. You're thinking with your own minds. But no but. Just be careful with your hearts." It was all I could offer. When they left for the first visit, Naomi arrived 10 minutes late. She wore a tailored coat and smiled too much. I watched from the porch as she opened the car door, waving like she hadn't disappeared for over a decade. The boys waved back. I stood there until they were out of sight. Then I went inside, took the manila envelope from its drawer, and opened it. Inside were their lives. Inside was my love in paper and pictures, dates, and signatures. And now I had 14 days to decide how much more I was willing to lose. She asked to meet for peace. That was the word she used in her message. Peace. As if she hadn't dragged me through court, called me a kidnapper, and tried to pry the boys from the only home they'd ever known. Still, I agreed. The Roseleaf Cafe hadn't changed in 20 years. Same sticky tables, same overworked waitstaff, same scent of burnt espresso beans and cinnamon scones. I picked a corner booth facing the door and laid the folder on the table before me. Not the manila one. A new one. Red. Thick. She walked in 5 minutes late, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. Her coat was spotless. Her nails freshly done. "Mom," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. I didn't respond. She smiled like we were two old friends mending fences. "I know this has been hard. For all of us. But I just want to move forward. The boys deserve." I opened the folder. The photos slid out first. One by one, I spread them across the table. Naomi on a yacht glass of champagne, raised in the air. Naomi in Cabo poolside, with two men I didn't recognize. Naomi at a luxury boutique, holding bags from stores I'd never afford. All date-stamped. All from the same weeks the boys had been in hospitals, healing from broken bones, asthma attacks, and the flu that landed Eli in urgent care at 9 years old. She reached for the photos. I stopped her hand. "Withdraw the case," I said calmly, "or I'll destroy what little is left of your name." Her smile faltered. "You wouldn't, I would." Her fingers twitched. I could see it in her eyes, the panic of losing control. "These boys," I said, tapping the table, "have college acceptances, scholarships, and peace of mind. All things you never gave them. You want the money. We both know that. But if you come near them again, I will burn every bridge you're still pretending to stand on." She didn't speak. She didn't have to. I gathered the photos, slid them back into the folder, and stood. The next move was hers. But the choice, that was already mine. The call came at 6:42 a.m., the kind that jolts you up before the second ring. A woman's voice, firm but not unkind. "Mrs. Merida Quinn." "Yes. This is Detective Karen Hollis with the Portland PD. Your daughter-in-law, Naomi Quinn, has been taken into custody on charges of aiding and abetting wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Her arrest is linked to ongoing federal investigations into her husband, Robert Hastings." I sat down, not from shock, no, that had passed weeks ago, but from the quiet weight of inevitability. "She asked to speak with you," the detective continued. "Said she wanted to discuss custody arrangements. Would you like to provide legal counsel?" "No," I said simply. "She has nothing to discuss with me." When I hung up, I found all three boys, Daniel, Marcus, and Eli, already awake and standing in the kitchen. They'd heard. Of course they had. "She's gone," Marcus said, not asking. I nodded. "And she won't be coming back." They didn't cheer. They didn't cry. They just breathed easier. The legal battle dissolved on its own. Her arrest nullified her claims. But what came next, what the boys chose to do, wasn't something I expected. "We want to change our names," Daniel said. "Legally." To what I asked, careful. "To Quinn Brown," Eli answered. "Brown for you." I couldn't speak for a moment. "You raised us," Marcus said. "You never left. You're our mother, and we want that in writing." The paperwork went through in a week. 3 new IDs, 3 amended school records, 3 signatures with Brown in bold ink at the end. Then the surprise I never saw coming. Daniel handed me a set of keys. "We used some of Dad's insurance," he said. "It's in all our names. But the deed starts with yours." It was a 2-story home on the edge of town room for each of them, a garden I'd always dreamed of, and space to finally rest. I walked through it that first day, running my fingers along the walls, imagining the sound of Sunday breakfasts, college breaks, grandbabies someday maybe. They call me Mom now. Not Mama, Grandma, just Mom. At parent-teacher meetings, on doctor forms, on every document that asks who raised them. Because now, finally, my name is the one beside theirs. And no one can take it away again.